Hello, my name is Ian Moll and I conduct several walking tours of Sunderland city centre, one of which is the topic we're going to talk about today, which is lost 60s pubs of Sunderland town centre. Now I'm standing in front of what is now the Railway Club. Back in the 60s, 70s, it used to be known as the Park Inn. And this straight Park Lane was a very lively place, it still is now, but we had the rink dance hall up here, and the bus station was there, of course, so people would pop in for one or two. My brother was in there about 1967, I think it was, and who should he see across the bar but Sunderland AFC's star left winger George Mulhall having a couple of pints. Not unusual maybe, but this was on a Saturday just before George was due to play at Roker Park. So he watched him go out the door, get on the bus and go and play. So this wasn't that unusual in those days. I don't know if he had a quick fag upstairs on the way there, but this is not recorded. The Park Inn also has a Beatle connection, which I have to thank Sunderland antiquarians for. I recently discovered this. Ringo Starr's mum's sister got married to a bloke from Millfield, and Ringo used to come up to Sunderland every now and again to see his auntie and uncle. He'd be about 17, 18 then, so we're talking about 1957, 58. And they'd have a few drinks in the town centre. One of the places they went to was the Park Inn. So the Beatles played here 5 times, but I didn't know they'd gone drinking here as well. So here we are outside of Chaplin's, a very popular pub. But back in my day, in the late 60s, early 70s, it was known as the Albion, a Vaux pub. So as most people will know, Vaux was the local brewery. But ironically, most of my mates, they didn't like Vaux beer apart from bottled double Maxim. Most people like Newcastle Exhibition. It was a beautiful drink, mind. I don't think you can still get it now. But over the years, Chaplin's has gradually taken over the adjoining buildings, so every time I go in, they seem to have added an extra little nook and cranny, which I like very much. So we're standing here next to the Priestman building in Durham Road, and just behind me, until 1973, I think it was a great pub called the Star. Back in the day, we used to get a lot of Norwegian students come to Sunderland, maybe to study designing ships or wherever it might be, and they were famous for drinking pubs dry. They had a nickname which is not a rude word. It was from a TV programme for kids called Noggin the Nog, about a Viking. So everybody called them the Nogs, and they seemed quite happy with that. So they were well known in the town where I lived in Elmwood Street. There was a Norwegian student lived next door upstairs, and they were quite popular with the local ladies, I seem to recall. One of my friends was married to a Norwegian guy who studied here, and she lived in Norway for 40 years. I have a little personal connection with the Star because the last time my granddad, Bob Jones, came out unassisted, he was on his way to the Star from his home in Elmwood Street. He was walking down Durham Road and he had a stroke, and he said, I saw the Star jump from one side of the road to the other, and he managed to make it back home, and they took him into Riot Hospital and he died there. But it was a very popular place for him and his old codger mates. I was just coming up to 18 at that time, so before then my granddad, he didn't bother with kids. They were like women's business as far as he was concerned. But my brother was a bit older than me, and he started taking my brother to the pub and talking to him man to man, but he never really spoke to me before that. So I was just coming up to the age where he would have invited me to, but it wasn't to happen, sadly. So here we are at the bottom of Old Chester Road. Behind me, back in until the late 70s, I think, there was a big triangle of streets, and a lot of the kids I went to Chester Road School with used to live here. And right at the very tip of the triangle, there was an incy little pub called the Phoenix. It looked to me like that some people had lived there and that they thought, oh, let's just make our house into a pub. It felt like that. It was really small and sort of cosy. It closed 1974, I believe, and before then, it was the only Ind Coupe Burton beers in Sunderland. So it's well gone. Everything's gone. So here we are outside Vesta Tilly's in High Street. Back in the 60s, 70s and later, it was known as the Black Bull. And if you've heard the Derek and Clive records, you'll be acquainted with the stories, the worst job I ever had. Well, I have to say this was the worst job I ever had in my life. I was only 18 in 1972. I previously had a paper round, but this was kind of upping it a bit when a friend of a friend said, Ian, can you be a glass collector, the pot boy at the Black Bull on the weekends? And I thought, well, we'll give it a go. I needed some money. And it was really awful. I mean, collecting the glasses wasn't too bad. You'd have problems like you had to go out obviously from behind the bar and collect all the glasses up, so you had to use a little flap in the bar, and there'd be two old codgers sitting there against the flap. The whole of the bar might have been empty, but they always sat there, and you had to keep asking them to get out the way about every 10 minutes, and they didn't take it too kindly. Also around about this time there'd been a few pubs in Crotery Road, which is under the leisure centre now. There was the Red Lion, the Three Tons and the Crow-Tree. So they'd closed, and quite a few of their regulars had sort of decamped to the Black Bull. And the manager said, "Ian, can you go and ask those old ladies to stop singing?" And let's say I asked them to stop singing, but they didn't take it too kindly. But the first night I was there, to make it much worse, they said, "Ian, the barmaid hasn't turned up. Can you take her place?" I mean, I had absolutely no training whatsoever. Somebody asked us for a rummy mac, or I'd never heard of a rummy mac then. And people were getting very angry. I just remember I could see a face, a sea of hostile faces staring at us from behind the other side of the bar. It was really awful like. So I did it for about 3 weekends, and I couldn't take any more. And I think I told the guy I was going on holiday or something. I told him that, and about 2 days later he passed us in the street. He didn't say anything, so maybe he understood. So before the bridges was all modernised and covered over, it used to be a very windy shopping centre, Walworth Way. And at the junction where the kids are playing in the sand today, upstairs there used to be a pub called the Upper Deck. I think it opened in 1967, and it was a very popular place to meet before you went out. We used to have a little pub crawl of the town, then go to a nightclub back in the 70s and 60s. But it closed a long time ago, and now it's I discovered it's somebody's private apartment. You can't see it, like it's all covered up these days. So we're in Lambton Street now, and I had to take a good look around because I couldn't recognise this place at all. But I'm led to believe it's what used to be Lambton Street. This was a great place for drinking in the 60s and 70s. Just behind me where the cinema is, or was, there were two good pubs, the Caledonia and the Imperial Vaults. Everybody called them the Cali and the Imps. The Cali was unusual in that the closing time was 10 o'clock. Everywhere else at that time was 10:30. I think the Cali closed 1997, and the Imps 2002. But they were just a hop and a skip from John Street, so it's very much still in the town centre. My main memory of the Imps is not a very happy one. It was Christmas Eve 1973. I was waiting for my friend at the back door, and suddenly the back door burst open and two big lads bundled out. One of them punched the other one in the head, and when he hit the deck he started booting him in the head. I thought, well, the spirit of Christmas is here. Not. So back in my early drinking days, the building over the road was quite a new place. It was called the Continental. It had opened in 1957. I have to say it seemed very big to me then. So we used to go in on the ground floor mainly, sometimes downstairs. A couple of memories. I remember being there with my big sister and her friends in April 1970, and Norman Greenbaum's Spirit in the Sky was number one. It really captures the essence of that time. I was downstairs there once, and I just wanted a half. And as I ordered the half, this heavy looking guy at the bar next to us said, "What a man." So across the street you can see My Deli. It's one of my favourite Indian places in Sunderland, by the way. But back in the drinking days, it was known as the Palatine until 1971. It had a posh hotel at the back. If you're a music fan, Deep Purple stayed there in October 1970 when they were playing at the rink. Anyway, so I used to go a lot in the 70s and 80s when it had changed its name to the Mowbray, and Friday nights especially was great. But later on in the 80s, when I wasn't around very much, the club downstairs called Dollins, and maybe you're one of the lucky people who saw the Clash play there in May 1985. This area's changed out of all recognition since the 60s. With the increase in road traffic, we've had to build more streets, obviously. If you came off the bridge in the 60s, it was a little tiny street, came up here, then you turned right into John Street, and Essen Way was just even a narrower little street. So there used to be various pubs. There was one right here called the Argo Frigate. It was demolished in 1966, I believe. I've got a bit of a soft spot for it because my first teacher in Chester Road Juniors in 1959 was Miss Reed, and her parents publicans at this bar. And I do believe that Miss Reid left teaching to take over the pub, so that was an interesting career move. And if we look over to our left, just approximately where the green traffic lights are, there was a nice looking pub which I never went in, called the Bridge End Vaults. I think that was demolished in 1971, and I was only 17 then, but of course I still went out drinking a bit, but we never got as far as this. There were enough places locally in the town centre to cater for our needs. So we're just across the road from where Vaux's brewery used to be until 2000. Opinions are divided, but whenever I got off the train from London and I came back, I loved the smell of the hops from the brewery. But a lot of people told us that it made them sick, but I thought it was great. Anyway, so the brewery closed 2000, and the tap house for the brewery was the brewery tap. It was in a little street on the right. The street isn't there anymore. So the pub had been there a very long time. It was previously called the Neptune, but it became Vaux's pub in 1974. And I used to go in quite a lot. It closed at the same time as the brewery in 2000. So as you can probably see, we're in High Street West. There was a pub opened here in 1969 called the Gannet. It was approximately here. And they thought big, like when they got some important person to open, they got Charlie Hurley, the #1 player of all time for Sunderland, of course. I used to go in occasionally. It was a downstairs bar, and I used to go in the early 70s. It had various names later on, Digby's and Mondo's or something like that, but of course it's all been swallowed up by Primark and everything. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video. If you want to come on one of my tours, I've got a Facebook site, Lost 60s Pubs of Sunderland Town Centre. I also want to say a big thank you to Alan Brett, because I did a lot of research using his books, Old Pubs of Sunderland Volumes 1 and 2. I do recommend them as well.